thank you all for joining us for this panel on digital identity and emerging trends in cyber. My name is Sharon Chand. I'm a principal with Deloitte's cyber team, and I'm super excited to be here facilitating this discussion with my esteemed panelists. I'm going to give each of them just a few moments to introduce themselves so you know who you're speaking with this afternoon, and then we'll dive right in. So Rex, if we can start with you.
Yeah, sure, thanks. So I'm Rex Booth. I'm the CISO at SailPoint. SailPoint is the leader in identity security. I've been there for about a year, coming off of some time in the government, most recently at CISA and the White House.
Hi, my name is Josh Davis. I am the Chief Cybersecurity Officer for Toyota North America, Toyota Connected North America, as well as an executive in the TMC organization focused on cybersecurity across enterprise products and connected services, including vehicles.
Hello, I'm Gillian Crossan. I'm a principal also in our cyber and strategic risk practice. And I have a couple of different roles at Deloitte. I am our global technology sector leader, so CES is one of my favorite times of the year. And also I am a lead client service partner within Deloitte for one of our largest technology clients, Amazon.
Hi, my name is Venki Rangachari. I'm the Vice President of Global IT at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, a leader in H2 Cloud solutions with everything as a service. We have products ranging from supercomputers. We own the fastest computer in the world, supercomputers, edge, networking, storage, compute, and software solutions. I head up the identity practice for HPE across customers, partners, and workforce. Super excited to be here, and thanks for being here. I know this is the last session before the happy hour, so thanks for your attendance.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. And I think well over 100 years of accumulated cyber experience sitting up on stage today. So thank you all for being here. Let's jump right in. And I'd love to ask sort of a broad question around your role in cyber and the chief security officer role, really how that's changed in the last couple of years and how you think it might continue to change in 2024. Josh, could you start us off?
Sure. So I've been at Toyota about 7 years now. Prior to that, I was at Qualcomm for 20 years. And so I spent about 21 years total leading security organizations. And so a couple of decades of seeing pretty interesting evolution. Obviously, the core cybersecurity objectives have been around for decades. And then the last 10, 15 years, you're seeing a rise in privacy related requirements that are often supported by cybersecurity control objectives. And then you have a whole set of regulations that are coming down forcing compliance activities. And then you have a lot of voluntary standards that you're trying to comply with. So generally what you're seeing is a convergence of control objectives across these four areas, like cybersecurity, privacy, and then what I call regulations and standards. And the organizations are realizing there's an efficiency in managing them holistically. So you're seeing this emergence of what I'll call a digital risk executive, right? And some companies have been toying with this idea for a fair amount of time. I probably saw my first digital risk officer maybe 10 years ago. It was a gentleman at Intel, and I've seen that though grow more and more. First in the software world, and now you're seeing it in companies like ours in the hardware and more general consumer services. So interesting evolution. As if I look forward and think about what's coming next, it's a whole lot more regulation probably and a whole lot more voluntary compliance standards.
Josh, or excuse me, Rex, you have that same chief security officer title. Anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I think over the past probably like 10 years or so, CISOs and people in our kind of roles have been kind of pounding on the door and asking for their seat at the table, right? And for a while, depending on the organization, depending on the maturity of the organization, CISOs and that role had been sidelined to some degree, right? That has changed, and I think there's just an ever increasing awareness of cybersecurity writ large, and generally mature organizations have now embraced the role of the CISO as the the chief risk executive. What I think is going to happen though is that will change the nature of the role, and it'll change the type of person that occupies that role to some degree, right? Whereas in the past, you really had to have a lot of technological, I think, street cred in order to make your way into a CISO position. I think now there's going to be a much heavier emphasis on business acumen, on risk awareness, and management of that style.
Yeah, to build on that, like you're literally seeing organizations being renamed. So what might have been the cybersecurity organization 5-10 years ago is now, like in our case, the cybersecurity and trust management organization, right? Because it's extending digital trust across all of those other domains.
Just to sort of make quick add to that as well, right? When we undertook a transformation, HP, 80-year-old company, $30 billion, right? We sold all these products for some time, and we announced into 2017 the transformation to an as a service, a cloud company, right? And when we did the digital transformation, digital trust was at the center, and what digital trust really meant was cybersecurity, right? And so we put that as a heart of it, and that's a key part of our transformation. It's not like you do everything else, and by the way, I also do cyber security. This is heart of the transformation, is part of the transformation itself. So embedding that digital trust into your entire transformation was a key change that we did when we did our transformation.
That transformation, that evolution, I think we're seeing that across cybersecurity, and really tees us up to maybe pivot into digital identity as well, part of our topic here today. We've heard a lot of discussion, in the media, certainly here at CES, around both human identities and non-human identities, right? Cars are increasingly autonomous, have multiple identities. Human identities are getting monetized, becoming increasingly transient. How do you see this intersection of human identity and non-human identity? And Rex, maybe you can start us off.
Yeah, sure. So look, I mean, that intersection is a fascinating thing to explore. I think ultimately to really appreciate, the various nuances of it, you have to first acknowledge the kind of the fundamental, the essence that identity plays in cybersecurity writ large. Cybersecurity, at least in my mind, is about making sure that the right people have the right access at the right time, right? And the corollary, making sure that the wrong people don't have the wrong access at the wrong time. At the front of that statement is people, right? And people, defined broadly to include both humans and non-humans, right? And that explosion of non-human identity, right? Whether it's servers or bots or smart devices, whatever it may be, has really driven a scalability challenge, in the identity industry, right? So if you think about kind of from a business perspective, a small business might have let's say 20 employees, and has 20 business applications that they use. You do the math, and it's 400 identity and access intersections that you have to manage. That's doable, right? That's manageable from a human perspective. But when you get into the mid-size and even the larger businesses, right? Let's say a mid-size business, 1,000 employees, but you probably have, I think our studies show, mid-size business has on average about 200 business applications, right? On the small side. You do the math on that, it quickly becomes untenable. Like, you can't manage that as a human, right? Because you're managing not just on an annual basis, you're going in and making sure everyone's got the right access, but you're managing people as they come in, as they go out, as they change roles, as roles change themselves. And that's where, at least for us, we've seen the necessity for, the smart application of AI, which, I mean, go down to the floor and throw a rock and you're going to hit something that says AI, but it's been around for a while, right? And we've been using it for 8 years in our products. Other similar solutions use it as well. Not as well as we do, obviously, but whatever, right? So, point being is that you really need to transcend kind of the human element in order to make sure that this really exponential explosion of identities that's out there remains manageable and secure.
Josh, Venky, anything you'd add?
Yeah, sure. I'll say in a catchy but ironic statement, like all of these non-human entities now have identity life cycles, right? So similar to what Rex said, a lot of the objects that we're dealing with, whether it be components on the vehicle itself, whether it be charging infrastructure, whether it be applications that are running on a vehicle for things like entertainment. All these have a set of metadata that goes with them that somehow are necessary and often utilized in building trust relationships between the human and the non-human elements. So tying it all together is really where the magic is right now. Tying it together in a way that maintains functional safety, tying it together in a way that benefits the consumer experience, and really drives adoption and renewal of services, whether they be subscription services or initial purchase services. So,
I think, I have a quick story, right? I think traditionally 20 years, 30 years ago, what we call as identity is a driver's license or a passport, right? And then came digital identity, right? I think what's missing in digital identity typically is a trust factor, right? That's gaining, but I think that's where, there's more work to be done. Recently in California, they announced the announcement of a electronic driver's license. I was excited, hey, I don't have to carry my driver's license. I went there to Apple Wallet, then I found out that only 4 states out of 50 states adopted that. I was sad. Next, they said download an app. Then they said take your picture and verify and download it. I went through 20 minutes, did everything. I was excited. I finally got a digital driver's license. I went to San Jose Airport and showed it, and the TSA agent said, no, this is not acceptable. Right? And so I still think that there's a lot of gap, and I think establishing the digital trust is key from an identity perspective.
Talk about digital trust and just brings up this concept of people attacking that trust, right? The cyber threat landscape. And, every day, literally every day, we see things in the media around the cyber threats. Jillian, how have you seen that threat landscape evolve over the last few years, and what are we facing in 2024?
So Rex brought up AI, so I think that's probably a good place to start, because everybody, every organization, every client that we work with is experimenting with AI right now, as are bad actors experimenting with AI right now. And, as you look at the threat landscape, I'm just going to give a couple of examples. So, AI is pretty good at code generation. One of the wonderful things about it is that democratization of innovation. So malware as a service is becoming much more of a reality in that it can put pretty decent malware code into the hands of those less savvy bad actors. So that's one. Another really good example is phishing. We know that phishing is generally the easy way into our organizations because all it takes is one person to click on the wrong link and then, all hell can break loose. So, if you think about phishing, often the way that we can identify phishing is with poor grammar or wrong cultural context. But, one of the things that Deloitte does is we do look at what the chatter that's going on in underground forums. We look at what's available in that underground marketplace. And there are technologies available for $100 a month that will help you with phishing in 27 languages and be able to use AI to really improve that cultural connection. So things like that are impacting the threat landscape in that it's getting harder and harder to detect. There's also data poisoning in large language models, another kind of interesting threat that's beginning to happen. And we're not here to talk about deep fakes, but deepfakes is another area that is, terrifying a lot of the C-suite executives and board within organizations. So the threat landscape is definitely getting worse from an AI perspective. But of course, AI is that double-edged sword in that, yes, it's getting worse, but leveraging AI in order to be able to improve threat detection is another important aspect of how the landscape is changing and evolving. And being able to leverage AI so that you can lower the cost of data breaches by identifying things faster, by identifying cross-industry and leveraging all the data that's available using AI and machine learning. So it's definitely something that's going to improve from a cybersecurity perspective as well as you're leveraging AI for detection. I mean, if you think about hunt teams, for AI to be able to come up with scenarios which humans may not have thought of, that's another great use of AI. But what I would say is that with the threat landscape changing, evolving, there is still underinvestment in cybersecurity within organizations. Not maybe in this room because you're all here listening to a cybersecurity panel, but there still is. And there's a lot of conversations about, well, will AI reduce costs? It will change the way money is spent. I don't think it will necessarily reduce costs from a cyber perspective because there will be different threats, different skill sets that people will need to have. So it's moving the money rather than, reducing costs at the macro level.
I think the great irony there is we talk about supercomputers, LLMs, ChatGPT, AI, all this different, right? What protects that AI application is this 8-character, 12-character password, right? How old school is that, right? I mean, can AI crack that password? Of course, right? And so I think we got to evolve from a cybersecurity perspective to be phishing resistant. I think passwordless is the way to go. I think ability to have cyber protections and risks, I think, is a key area, right? I think it's an irony where we talk about advancement there, and then you have passwords moving from characters to phrases and maybe songs and paragraphs later, right? I think we got to make a fundamental shift in moving away from passwords, moving away from these tokens, moving to more, 502 encryption, hardware encryption, and also phishing-resistant technologies.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Well, let me back up a little bit. So besides my role at Toyota, I'm also the not the vice chair, but was the chairperson of the Auto ISAC, and which is the automotive industry's ISAC, where we're doing a lot of threat intelligence sharing and vulnerability information sharing. And while I don't think we've seen as an industry a lot of deep attacks against identity, we are tracking it very carefully, because if you look at some of the most advanced software companies in the world, the Microsofts and the Ciscos and the Adobe's another one, just to name a few that have talked about what's happened to them. Like, there's this concept of token theft, which is a particular style of attack, which is what's driving what you're saying about the adoption of FIDO2 technologies and passkeys and all that kind of stuff, right? So it's one of the things that keeps us up at night. How are they going to go after consumer identities? How are we going to go after employee identities, partner identities, supplier identities? It's near the top of our the risk that we're trying to manage down and mitigate, and it's also near the top of the risk that we're investing in to try to mitigate.
So just to quickly build off what Jillian was saying about the kind of the democratization of the threat. I mentioned that I came out of government to come to SailPoint. I was in government for about 10 years, very focused on, nation state threat actors, within the U.S. context. And then prior to that, I was at a company called, Mandiant, which is, focused on state-sponsored corporate espionage. So that's kind of the lens that I see the world through. And 10 years ago, we were very focused, at least in the U.S., kind of laser focused on about 4 countries that had what we considered to be material offensive cyber capabilities. There are other kind of nascent players, but they weren't really very sophisticated, weren't very successful. Over time, that's changed, right? And now there are many more countries that are considered to be capable, and have material offensive cyber capabilities. And that's because cyber produces like a good ROI, when you talk about offensive, development, right? Think about how expensive it would be to build a kind of a ballistic missile program, right? Versus offensive cyber capabilities. Now, those two things accomplish very different objectives, but you get a lot of return on your investment from a cyber perspective. And we've seen, not only the new players enter the field, but we've seen an increasing sophistication among all the players in the field as well. So, I mean, I think, but to your point, like the good news is, Josh, is that, organizations like the ISACs and ISAOs and threat sharing organizations, we've gotten better about collective defense. And I think there's more interest in collective defense, less shame about sharing when bad things happen to you, and that helps the ecosystem overall.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely in a kind of malware as a service world, and it's gone beyond the nation state element to hacktivists, etc., who are very quickly responding, leveraging social media, leveraging attacks of websites, etc. For their own materials. So there are definitely increasing elements who have the power to leverage the technology that's now very readily available for very little money.
Yeah, one interesting tidbit there, a timely one. And it ties directly to this identity concern. So over the past holiday break, there are a couple good articles about this, but validated by threat intelligence. There's this event that some underground communities held called Leakmas. So instead of Christmas, they had this event called Leakmas, and the gist of it was that a bunch of these underground attackers got together and decided that they could all benefit from each other's information, and particularly consumer identity information. So they basically did a mass sharing event of their own. You talk about this malware as a service. I guess this is like a attacker identity as a service or identity theft as a service. I'm not really sure how to describe it, but they are as much as the ISACs are building community of defense. The attackers are also building attack communities of defense, and particularly just in this past December, you saw this Leakmas, which was all largely about consumer identity, and they included things like usernames and passwords of hacked sites, some of which were publicly available, some of which were not, or broadly available, and some of which were not. It included supposedly things like past hacks of credit reporting agency information, or pseudo credit agencies like LexisNexis and stuff like that. So, and you tie that back again to vehicle services and autonomous, and this track being about the automotive and autonomous evolution. Like we see that when that kind of stuff happens, all of a sudden we see a bunch of grinding against our connected services of people trying to guess those usernames, those passwords that are all being shared. And then you tie it, I'm just going to think forward now, and I'm not saying this has happened, but if you think about how this could play out, well, next thing you know, you have all those connected services and their authentication and identity services then tied to autonomous. And then you end up with, some bizarre scenario where, Teslas could be driving into each other. Okay, sorry, I shouldn't say a brand. I'm just referring to a movie that was out recently. You could end up with vehicles, doing things in an unplanned, unintended way by the vehicle owner because there was some connected services identity-related theft.
I feel like now we're all suitably terrified about what's going to happen in the threat landscape going into 2024. And you all mentioned how identity is a part of those threats that we're going to see more and more. I'd love to talk a little bit about identity beyond threat mitigation, because I think that's where it started, right? implement identity management as a way to help manage cyber risks. But more and more, we've seen identity emerge with real business value, user experience, user productivity. Vinky, maybe you can talk a little bit about how you've really seen that evolution of the value of digital identity.
Sure. So when we started our transformation to as a service, and we had multiple businesses, storage, compute, networking. A lot of these have their own applications, own authentication mechanisms, own customer partner experience journeys, and moving to a common platform. One of the key aspects was identity, right? The first experience for a customer or a partner is the authentication, logging into the system, the identity, right? And we want to make that experience a frictionless experience. And that was key for us because a frictionless customer experience in an as a service business leads to more usability, people logging into the platform more frequently, using features. So that is a key part of our customer experience, our frictionless journey. The second aspect is what we want to do is to streamline all the roles, right? You could have a storage product that calls storage administrator and a compute product that could call systems administrator. Might mean the same thing, in terms of access and permissions, right? And so we want to streamline those roles, ensure that everyone had the same access and permissions there. So that is a key aspect of how we thought that the identity in our journey is a key aspect of the customer and partner journey. And that proved to be pretty critical because once we unlocked their potential and added more secure features on top of it, we saw more and more customers using the system. The usability increased, the number of customers, partners logging in, increased. So it's a key aspect of customer and partner experience.
Thank you. I have one more prepared question for the panel, and then we'll open it up for audience questions as well. So if you've got a question that's been forming in your mind, we have a mic right about halfway down the aisle here if you want to make your way to the mic to ask the question. But I'll tee up my final prepared question for the panel, really around cloud adoption, because I think you've all talked about this in all the different questions we've been through. How do you think digital identity needs to continue to evolve to meet some of this exploding growth in cloud adoption? Are there emerging solutions out there that are ready to scale already?
Absolutely. And, Venki, you talked about frictionless. So digital identity is only one piece of this. And, as you think about the cloud, what we're trying to do at Deloitte is to kind of flip the narrative around, leveraging the fact that your data's in the cloud to actually improve the cybersecurity posture that you have within your environment. Being able to have your data in the one place so that you can be using AI and ML to identify threats, etc., is an important step forward. And within Deloitte, we do have a solution that we've developed in collaboration with AWS. It's called Converged Security. So what we are doing is we've created a managed service, bringing together the platform of all of the pieces that you need in order to manage security in that cloud environment. So Converged Security, it leverages Security Lake, it leverages AWS Bedrock, which is Amazon's Gen AI web service that it released recently. And what it does is it helps you detect anomalies, it helps you respond to attacks, and helps you recover from cyber incidents. It also includes some services around incident response that we've brought together, because the idea is to be able to get to autonomous security with human oversight and very little intervention. That's really the holy grail as we're talking about security solutions. Now, I mentioned it's a platform. Cybersecurity, just like much of what we do in our business today, relies on an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem of partners, an ecosystem of third parties that we're all working with in various aspects of our business, whether it's supply chain or, in this case, cybersecurity, so that we're bringing the best of all of those worlds to help us manage the cyber environment. And we were talking about sharing of data. Within that solution, as we are managing and providing the managed service for a number of organizations, being able to share some of that data so that we can recognize patterns across organizations so that we can more quickly identify where the hacks are occurring, where the issues are, so that we can more quickly deal with them. That begins to lower the cost of each individual cyber incident. So it's a powerful set of solutions, and I do think moving to that platform, relying on that ecosystem of partners, is where we're really going to be moving to from a cybersecurity perspective.
I think if you look at the evolution of cloud, right, started with the applications, right, the SaaS applications moving to the cloud, the Workdays, the Salesforce, right. Then we started with infrastructure as a service with infrastructures like AWS, other hyperscalers that provided the cloud infrastructure. Then we had the pandemic where humans moved to the cloud, right? I mean, we all work from home, hybrid work, dial in from our home, then network, Starbucks, wherever, right? And if you combine that with where the workloads resides, it's truly in a multi-cloud environment, and that's where security becomes complex. Just to add to Gideon's thing, that's where you need to tie the threads between the different clouds and how that correlates with the user identity, right? And that's a very interesting offering, and very, very, very valuable.
Yeah, the other thing that I would add is, having your data in the cloud and being backed up by the cloud, and having that elastic capability that the cloud provides, it also enables you to have things like a vault so that you can recover from a cyber incident by making sure that you're backing up in an unconnected way all of those critical assets that you have within your business, so that if the worst case scenario does happen, that you're prepared to recover.
Thank you. Do I see a brave audience member making their way to the microphone for a question?
Or leaving.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I want to pick up on the point that Vinky was describing with that scenario of showing your digital driver's license at TSA. And it strikes me that for a lot of the transactions in everyday life, they don't actually need all of your identity. What they really need is like one particular attribute to be verified. Yes, my date of birth was at least 21 years ago and I am eligible to buy alcohol. But we constantly have to hand over a copy of our passport or a copy of our driver's license, perhaps to a firm that is not necessarily going to be able to store and protect that, and it all ends up on the dark web and enables the next lot of identity theft. So do we need to be thinking of this less about the whole of your digital identity and rather about, perhaps the language you used earlier about trust networks, about having the ability to just have a trusted source that can verify the one attribute in real time and help to minimize the data transfer that way?
Yeah, I can take a stab at that. I think it starts with the building the personas, right? And I think once you need to have a consumer persona or a personal persona, a corporate persona, and any other personas that you have, right? Building the trust and foundation today. If you look at peel the identity layers, it's done by certificates, right? You have SSL and other ones, right? And that is also changing, right? With quantum computing, I think there's with the QC regulations, I think in the quantum computing, all the certificates are going to be irrelevant in about a decade or so, right? I mean, it all has to be upgraded, right? I think there are some new services that I'm starting to see where these you have the notion of trusted certificates, where they verify your identity and verify your licenses and based on the region. So you also have a concept called regional certificates, or you have a EU only certificate or a China only certificate, if you will, for certain geos, and that is becoming more and more complex, right? I think that is the area where I see there's a lot more patch there. So I sit on the board of advisors of DigiTrust, and they have a lot of these new services that are developing to address this particular issue there. But as in more such services come, you can actually quantifiably verify. Then there would be that sense of trust that develops across, right?
Yeah. So your use case is really interesting, right? We were actually just talking about this just prior to this session, the concept of self-sovereign identity, which is this kind of emerging concept where individuals have a lot more control over what they share, the context and how they share it, the ability to claw back data and verification that they have shared. The technical details of which I think transcend this discussion, but it's certainly an interesting concept and people are working on it. I would argue that, at least to my awareness, it is still in the nascent stages of kind of implementation and development, and I'm curious to see how it shakes out, because one of the problems that the cybersecurity community has is that we look through the world through our lens, which is a lens of kind of awareness, of technical sophistication, of embracing technology, and that's not how the rest of the world always works, right? There are large swaths of humanity that don't really care to understand the technical details of how to transfer portions of their identity to a bank, or even understand why that would be valuable, right? So it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out, but yeah, there are people kind of working exactly on that problem.
It is a very tough topic. On one hand, to your point, traditional cybersecurity discipline is going to say, hey, I want the most information available to me that I can get, because I want to make the best adjudication that I can about a decision, right? Like of trustworthiness, whether it be for identity or whether it be for supply chain, or pick your trust decision that you have to make. But certainly, as individuals, we covered our own privacy, and we certainly want to pull those threads and see, okay, where's the right balance between the ability to make intelligent and necessary adjudications versus data minimization and privacy. Like it is really tough. We are privacy advocates, and strategically, we're aligned to be privacy preserving in the vast strategies, but it's going to continue to evolve heavily over the next couple of years.
I think great question, and maybe just one final one as we start to close out here. I think we've all seen examples of the big cyber transformation where relatively immature product security or security organization goes to significantly mature over a rapid period of time and transformation. What, in your experience, drives that step change? Does it have to be post-breach when someone wakes up and decides to transform? Is it a new regulation? Or what have you seen really drive the kind of step change and transformation that might be needed to combat the threats and the cloud transformation, everything that y'all have been talking through?
I think a combination of some of these, right? I think, as a company, if you adopt principles like zero trust, I think that's key to sort of, there's a whole concept of, if people don't understand zero trust, this whole concept, decades ago across, there was a firewall, right? And when people went through the firewall, anything behind the firewall was trusted, right? That's no longer the case today, right? People go to clouds, different clouds, it's not about a use case. So it's more, the whole concept of securing each and every layers behind that. So adopting a zero trust principle is, I think, key. I think some of the cybersecurity regulations, the SEC regulations, are moving company in a direction of having more of a button-down cybersecurity program, increased transparency, increased accountability, right? And I think the threat vectors typically tends to be the weakest link. I used to work in I was CTO in a hotel company, and the weakest link was the front desk, right? People would go to the front desk and say, hey, can I use your computer for doing Google Maps? And all of a sudden that computer had all the credit card numbers and had one-step access to a central reservation system, right? And the weakest link here is that monitor there. That TV probably has links to some back-end IT systems, and whoever has a privileged access, to get there could get there. So I think bad actors, exploit weak links. Having a least privileged access model is very key as you look at security and access as in a very holistic manner.
I mean, I do think regulation has an important element here too. And, you talked about it a little bit around the SEC, but it may not be regulation specific to cyber. I always talk about GDPR when we start thinking about AI and how AI is being used, and GDPR and that right to be forgotten is going to be a major issue in the world of AI. So as you think about the regulations that impact you, I do think that regulation is a very good way to wake up an organization that, oh, we're going to have to spend some money here if we're going to be compliant. So there's definitely carrots and sticks in terms of beginning to have more of a holistic view of what you should be doing around cyber and transforming your cyber posture.
Yeah, I'll add, if you look at what I can see through the auto ISAC, for example, or previous ISACs I was a member of, or many of the CISO peer groups that I'm a member of, we regularly benchmark sort of where we're spending money, where we're investing resources, where we're investing our top talent in to think about next generation services and how they impact our products and enterprises. And I can say for certain, the last 10 years, the number one area has been identity. Now, lately, like when you throw in privacy and all the things I mentioned earlier around other sort of digital trust concepts, maybe it's not as much of a number one by percentage-wise as it used to be, but it is still maintaining number one. It's shocking every year I see it. Like it's the dollar volume, the talent in terms of number of people, and where you want your best people to be working and focused on consistently is identity-related services. And that extends not just, again, to enterprises, but also the consumers and to IoT and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think the triggers for change are the most effective triggers for change, and for the most drastic change are external, right? And so Jillian talked about regulation. That's one of them. You mentioned post breach. I mean, there's this concept of, not to get too academic, of this Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, and it basically says like after a traumatic event, that as applied to us after a traumatic event, like you've got this opportunity for change. And you have to capitalize on that because you're going to lose that opportunity very quickly. But it used to be just breaches that were enabling this drastic change. Now it's regulation. It's increasing awareness. There are opportunities for organizations to kind of self-initiate, but still, I think it's external stimulus.
Lots for us to think about. I can't thank you all enough for your time and comments today. I know I learned a lot. I'm sure the audience learned a lot. We're just a few minutes over, but I really appreciate everybody's attention. And again, thank you all for your time and contributions. We'll stick around for a few minutes after if anybody does have any final questions. If not, please enjoy CES. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.